Hey guys, it's Amber from Notable Ink. Painting white flowers can be a challenge for most of us. I'm going to share some tips on how you can add dimension and keep those blooms white. Stay tuned to color Altenew Paint-A-Flower Daffodil 2 ways. Here is the newly released Altenew Paint-A-Flower Daffodil, and though it's a 4x6 stamp set, it has two beautiful arrangements that are nice size for coloring. Here's the product inserts, which gives you some ideas and also some perfect pairings, other stamp sets that pair perfectly with this set, and we are going to use both of these floral images today. I have the Altenew Watercolor paper set. This is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, 50% cotton paper. And I decided to stray from the norm and do a white and pink daffodil. I've never actually seen these before, but when I searched for some inspiration, I thought they were beautiful and it would be fun to do. I have the Altenew Artist Watercolor 24 pan set here, and you can see that I've used this quite a bit, particularly in recent videos. And I'm going to use some red cosmos, green meadows, rainforest, and I'll let you know if I add some additional colors as well. Now to stamp my image, I'm going to use blush from Red Sunset, and I wanted to use a light color because I want to do some no-line watercoloring, and I usually pick a coordinating color that I'm going to watercolor in. So since the flowers are going to be white, I thought the blush pink, which will be the centers, would work well. So I know it's hard for you to see the stamping here because it's so light, but I'm going to adjust my camera settings in just a minute so that you can see what I'm painting. But you can see that I did not bother to mask anything. I just went ahead and stamped the images over each other. Since the paint is going to cover it up, I felt that would be a much faster way to go. So here you can see I've adjusted my camera settings so you can see, and I have a wet paintbrush. I'm just wetting the edge of this leaf here. You can see that it overhangs the white flower, and I wanted to make sure that the petals still appeared white and that you couldn't see the white line running through it. It's pretty easy to just soften that up. To prepare my paints, I use a pipette to drop a drop of water into the pans that I'm going to use, and that just softens it up and gets it ready. It makes it a lot easier for me to get the pigment off with my brush without roughing up my brushes too much. It softens that paint and gets it ready to use. So I have a mixture of red cosmos and tea party here, and then I'm adding quite a bit more water into the little well next to it because I want it really diluted. This is a soft pink for these flower centers here, and you can see that I have my inspiration photo off to the right. So I'm using a wet on dry technique and just dropping in a little bit of that diluted pink. For each element that I paint, I'll show it to you 1 or 2 times so that you get the hang of it, and then we'll fast forward to the next element. Otherwise, we'll be here for a really long time. So after I get those dilute centers down, then I'm going to come in with a little bit of a darker pigment and add a darker edge similar to our inspiration photo. Now I've put a droplet of water in the next well to super water down that pink pigment because I want to add an even lighter center. In the inspiration photo, the flowers as they come to the center almost have a transparent appearance before they become yellow in the deep center. So I'm just going to mix together some yellows. I have Citrus Burst and Fall Harvest. And I'll just put a little bit of that yellow in the center. Now, if the flower is straight on, then I may put it right in the center like this. Otherwise, I'll offset it if it looks like the flower is angled down. And this will make more sense as the flowers get a little further along in the painting. This is definitely in the ugly duckling stage, and I encourage you to keep going. Once you get to a point in your watercolor where you're just not happy with it, it doesn't look right, you don't think it's going to turn out well, keep going because in most cases it does get better. You just have to get past that ugly duckling stage. So here I've mixed together Rock Collection and I've super diluted it for a very, very light transparent gray. And I'm just dropping that into the base of these petals. This is going to be the only painting that we do on the white petals. And I thought about this for quite a bit to try and figure out, okay, how do I get these white petals to stay white, but also separate them from the background because I'm not going to paint the background. I wanted to just keep the background white. So I'm going to let that dry, and as I'm painting the leaves and the stems, I'm thinking about how I'm going to achieve that separation of the flower from the background. So here I'm mixing together green meadows and rainforest. And again, so typically with my leaves, a lot of times I like to do wet on wet technique, but with flowers that are this small, leaves that are this small in these small areas, I tend to go with a wet on dry technique because it's a little more manageable. If you put too much water in one of these leaves, it's just going to blend into everything else around it. So for these small areas, I definitely do recommend wet on dry technique. That means that your brush is wet with the pigment and your paper is dry. Your wet on wet technique would be when you put down clean, clear water first into the element that you're going to paint and drop pigment in. So I've put down a light layer of green to start with, and then I'm going to go ahead and add some shadows now. So there weren't too many of the leaves that I went back in and added additional color after it dried. I just kind of tried to do everything at once, and here you can see the finished leaves. So now it's time to separate the petals from the background and then also from each other by adding some dimension. I'm a certified Zentangle teacher, and I often do shading to my tiles, my Zentangle tiles or pieces, with just a graphite pencil. This is a normal household pencil. There's nothing special about it, but what you really do need with your pencil is a tortillon or a paper stump, which is what you see here. So once you put down just a bit of graphite around the edges, and you don't want to completely outline it, just add a little bit here and there in between the petals and then at the edge of the petal. Then you're going to tease that graphite out into the paper, and that's going to pull the bloom away from the background. It'll also separate the petals from each other because it creates your casted shadow. Now, you definitely could do this with your watercolors and paint, but these are really small blooms, and I wasn't sure with the level of watercolor artist that I am that I would have enough control to get the look that I was going for. That's why I opted for the pencil and the tortillon. I felt like I'd have a lot more control here. So here you can see these two blooms. I've only done two so far, and the huge difference that makes. So our other blooms without the shading just look pretty flat and just blend into the background. The graphite makes a huge difference, and it's really easy to do. So here I'm just using a stamp scrubber to clean off my sentiment there. And this is a sentiment from the Paint-A-Flower Daffodil set. So I'm just stacking 2 sentiments, and then I'm going to splatter on some paint with the jet black ink spray. So I just tap off the majority of the ink back into the bottle, and then as you can see here, I just tap on the paint. Make sure that you clean your surface right away so that you don't smear any of it onto your project. Here's the finished card, and I love how these blooms turned out. As I said, there was a pretty bad ugly duckling stage there, but I think the pink and the white blooms turned out really nicely. I hope that you give the graphite pencil a try. Moving on to the next card, I'm going to stamp the second floral arrangement in permanent black ink so that I can use my artist markers. Make sure that you let your ink dry completely before you start coloring to eliminate any smearing that might occur. So here I have the frayed leaf artist marker, and I'm just doing some really simple coloring, you guys. Nothing too exciting. I'm not even doing any color blends on the leaves. Here I have the mountain mist marker, and I'm just using the bullet nib to fill in these tiny little blooms. For the flower centers, I'm going to use the same colors that I watercolored with. I'll start with blush, and then rouge, and then crimson, which are all from the Red Sunset family. For these smaller little flowers, I'm going to use mountain mist, and then I actually come in and add a little bit more color with frayed leaf to the base of those petals, just for something a little bit different. And then for the daffodil petals, I decided to go with your standard yellow. Felt like we needed to represent the yellow here somewhere. So I start with a base coat of buttercream, and then I'll come in with a little bit of warm sunshine at the base of the petals, and those are both from Summer Afternoon Artist Marker set. So here I'm just trying to decide, it looks a little flat, so here's where I bring in a little frayed leaf with the bullet nib tip to the mountain mist flowers, and then I'm going to bring in that warm sunshine just for a little bit of dimension at the base of these petals. I'll add just a touch of the crimson to the centers as well, and I'll just blend that out a little bit with the rouge marker. All that's left is to stamp a sentiment from the Paint-A-Flower Daffodil stamp set with Obsidian Pigment Ink. Lastly, I add splatter with the jet black ink spray, and these cards are done. Here's a close-up so you can see the coloring in more detail. So really simple coloring, and I love how bright and cheery this looks. I hope you guys feel inspired to paint some white flowers, and we'll use the graphite tip. Let me know down below what other tips you have for painting white flowers or coloring white flowers. Is there a tip or trick that would help all of us that we should know about? This video is part of an Altenew blog hop and giveaway, so be sure to leave a comment on my blog with the link down below so that you're in for a chance to win. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, liking, and ringing that bell so you don't miss any new inspiration. Here's a couple more videos for you before you leave, and I'll see you real soon.